Well, welcome everybody. My name is Will Marsh. I'm the Director of Education here at Premier Research Labs, and I'm so excited to welcome you all to the Premier Living podcast, where I have an esteemed guest, Dr. Daniel Schilling from Sequoia Health. He is a true steward of health at Premier Research Labs. He's been working with our company for almost a decade. It's been a very long time working with our organizations, and he's been helping his community and far and beyond really integrate principles of holistic health and integrated movement as a chiropractor who actually doesn't do any adjustment, but actually specializes in a technique known as brain activation. And so, Dr. Schilling, I want to thank you so much for joining us on our podcast today and sharing your wisdom with our community. And we're focused on movement this month. And so I wanted to, maybe before we even go into your specializations and your techniques and your philosophy, talk to us about your journey, like how you got involved in health, how you became a chiropractor, and, what you've really uncovered in regards to kind of the truths and the principles of health that you're sharing with your clients and beyond. So, Dr. Schilling, welcome.
Yeah, appreciate that introduction, Will. Great to be with you all. PRL has been a great support for me in my career, and the tools that they provide through the functional nutrition is second to none. So it's a joy to be able to give back to the community. It's served me greatly, so I appreciate the opportunity to give them back. To paraphrase your question, basically, as an athlete my whole life, I've been searching for how to unlock my abilities, my true capabilities, if you will. And one of the greatest boons to that journey has been PRL's nutrition. Before I got into chiropractic understanding as a college athlete, then I have a much better perspective now of how food and lack of nutrition was definitely limiting me as far as how strong I got, how fast I ran, how effective I was on the field, or at anything I was doing, whether it was in the classroom or whatever. And the nutrition aspect of what PRL offers helps me feel my best on a daily basis, helps me serve my participants on a daily basis the best, and eliminates a lot of symptoms, which who wants to manage symptoms? So for me, stepping from athlete to engineer to chiropractor, and starting my journey by learning the diversified adjusting as every chiropractor does, and understanding through kinesiology what muscles were connected to spinal segments, and figuring out my listings and adjusting based on muscles rather than joint subluxations, if you will, for all the chiropractors out there. I started then layering on the nutrition because I was finding that as I was adjusting people, chiropractic we say, did the adjustment hold? Right? Did your adjustment, how long did it last? People tend to talk about these questions. And I would always get good feedback that, man, I felt great for 3 days, a week, and then it eventually came back. And I started thinking, well, that doesn't make sense. If I'm addressing the root cause, why isn't it just fixing itself? I'm teaching the body how to help itself, and I'm affecting the nervous system. And then I would start bringing in QRA points and understanding how the meridians are feeding the organs, and whether the muscles are shut down, and meridian activation and stuff like that. So learning QRA back in 2015, was an amazing eye-opening experience. And being brought into the QRA family and being on stage with Dr. Marshall and learning from him and things like that was an amazing opportunity, because I was then able to take the people I was adjusting and giving them support with functional nutrition to then have the opportunity to have weeks, months, and more of symptom-free life. And that's what they wanted. They didn't want to take the pill. They didn't want the adjustment. They wanted the symptom-free life. And that got me about 65% of the way there. And eventually I drifted into neuroemotional health and understanding how the mind and the psyche affect the body. And that, of course, then either helps or hinders the biochemistry, helps or hinders the structures. And so that's kind of been my evolution. But one of the greatest opportunities I had to enhance my health and the health of the people I serve has been through the quantum nutrition that PRL creates.
Thank you so much for that shout out. We're honored to support you and your mission of supporting your clients to ideal health. Something I wanted to kind of hone in on is the aspect of chiropractic. And, when people are looking at chiropractors, right, and they're, looking for kind of their health plan, so to speak, or how they're going to kind of take their health to the next level, they may look at a chiropractor, right? And what's really interesting is one of the most searched terms on chiropractors is, what does a chiropractor do, right? And it sounds like your journey, right? Because you started as you're true, like, old age, traditional chiropractic adjustments. And now you've moved into a totalitarian or like a total healthcare model, right? Very holistic. So for our audience, because, we have practitioners listening, but we do also have consumers looking to, take charge of their health. Would you be able to define kind of from your view, what is chiropractic and how it's evolving in the landscape?
Sure. It's a hands-on modality. It's designed to help people eliminate their symptoms and get back to living. We pride ourselves on saying we work with the nervous system, so we are feeding back to the brain information about how a joint is, subluxated is the fancy term, but out of position in its normal range of motion, so it's kind of stuck. So a person who is considering going to a chiropractor is going to say, I would ask my chiropractor, how is your adjustment going to resolve my root cause? And I would then say, well, I'm observing where your body is out of balance, and I'm doing what I can to help restore that balance, teaching the body how to assume the optimal position with the hope of the brain and nervous system adapting to that, and then holding that position. Right? We talk about educating the nervous system and then maintaining it in its optimal state. And that's how someone would consider using chiropractic as a tool for living their optimal life, their optimal wellness, if you will.
Makes sense. And so in your journey, kind of through your profession, you were finding that those adjustments maybe weren't necessarily holding. Is that correct? Like they weren't necessarily sticking. And so this is where kind of you expanded your care model, so to speak, into nutrition and everything that we kind of discussed thus far.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a recovering perfectionist, recovering procrastinator, everything's got to be, buttoned up, with a bow on it, and it's got to be great. So if someone comes back and says, yeah, I got, doc, my C2 is out, or my lumbago is giving me a grief, and it's of course jokes, but anyone who's ever done adjusting before is going to hear that from their participant or their patient, if you guys call them that from time to time. And I was not satisfied from my own standpoint of having been adjusted by my colleagues and the amount of time that my symptom relief was lasting, which for me, I'm not a big fan of the definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. If someone comes back to me with the same issue, the same limitation 2 times, maximum 3, I'm thinking, okay. Like if they come back one after the first time and they said, yeah, it's better, but it's not gone. Okay, I will switch. I will change things, look at the body differently, test different muscles, ask them about different positions, and then go from that standpoint. But even someone who's just strictly a structural participant with me, who only does structural, I let them know when I first meet them. By the 3rd time, if this isn't 90% resolved, we're losing functional nutrition, and that's when I bring in PRL products.
It's amazing. What do you have like a distinct moment in time where you realized you had to integrate the nutrition, or was that kind of always? I mean, obviously being an athlete, that's my background too. We kind of know that we have to prioritize what goes into our body to support the performance of our body. But, I think so often, there's a lot of chiropractic models and clinics that are just pure adjustment, right? And, I've seen where, they might mention nutrition, they'll talk about, certain supplements, but they don't go into, why there could be dysfunction in your overall, like how you're moving through the world because of how you're nourished, right? And I think that's sometimes a big light bulb moment for people when they realize that the food in their body actually can determine how they move through the world, right? In terms of efficiency and, joint integrity and all that. Did you have like a light bulb moment, or was that kind of just always innately there?
I think, necessity is another law of invention, which when I wasn't getting the results I wanted with my participants, I had to pivot. I had to say, okay, there's got to be something more to this. I am a very effective adjuster. I am listening to the body. I'm testing the muscles. I'm resolving the subluxations. I'm restoring nerve root function. The body's turning back on and it's showing proper function, proper optimal function, if you will. Why isn't it maintaining itself? Because the body is immensely intelligent. Therefore, if I'm not getting the results I want, then I'm saying to myself, I'm not getting to the root cause. I don't know that I really had a full appreciation of how important the concept of, supplements and food are information to the body. I ate pretty well from probably 14 on. I mean, when I was a kid, we were eating Ho-Hos and Twinkies and drinking Mountain Dew and frying bologna in the microwave and all kinds of garbage. And then my dad remarried when I was about 13, and we had a big shift, which I'm grateful for. But it wasn't until I started becoming introduced to the quantum nutrition, the really high quality, high energetic remedies that Pierre puts together, that is designed to engage with the acupuncture meridian systems and the Chinese medicine principles, that I started seeing, like, holy cow, this can really shift a person fast. Someone with chronic pain, they can, I used to nickname this the limp in, leap out clinic, because people would come in doubled over, can't stand up, and I would do some testing on them and figure out what's going on, figure out what nutrition was going to reestablish the energy flow in the muscles and give them that range of motion. And then we would do the physical treatment, because I wanted to know before I did the physical treatment what was going to cause it to resolve over long term. So I would start with the functional nutrition scan once I figured out what the weak muscles were and the disability was, and then I would do the physical adjusting or the muscle work or what the mind-body activation after that, because I wanted them to walk out of here and know that they came in weak, they had pain, they were exposed to a nutrient, it resulted in strength and more mobility or decrease in disability. So they would have that connection with, when they take that, what it's for and what it's going to do for them. Then I would do the physical work, and then I would send them home with rehab exercises or whatever it might have been.
And how often, with the clients that you're seeing, is it, they're coming in, is it now that you've seen that they come in only a couple times and it's typically resolution, or are you now seeing, like, that your clients are more lifelong, they're coming in for continual kind of repair or advancement in their health journey?
Sure. If you're not overwhelmed, you're not learning. So get comfortable with being comfortable. Step into the unknown. Every one of us seeks comfort, seeks familiarity, seeks predictability. And that is just not how you're going to help the people in your practice that you want to help. If you're going to step into the functional nutrition side of things, understand that you want to take one bite at a time. The old adage of, how do you eat an elephant? You take one bite at a time. With functional nutrition, it can be very overwhelming, and that's okay as long as you're saying, I'm playing the long game. Okay, I'm going to go slow now in order to go faster later. That's a Maffetonism. Phil Maffetone, a chiropractor who wrote a book. The point is, anybody can learn it as long as you're willing to be humble and patient and allow yourself to become accustomed to a new system. Take one little bite at a time, add in one little thing at a time, spend a little bit of time off hours working with people who are more complex to figure out what's going on with them, how you can help them. And as you gain more confidence, it will become second nature.
Sure. One of my favorite adages actually is fast is slow and slow is fast. And so taking your time and, being, gentle and kind of, how, if you're encountering friction or frustration, just moving through that and allowing your body to acclimate kind of to what is the new normal, right? If that's, you have additional intakes or you're doing additional work with your clients, remember, it's all part of the process to keep learning and growing. I believe a lot of colleagues and yourself probably would agree with the statement that stress is a leading cause for a lot of chronic disease that our population is facing. And I would love your insights, if you're willing to share them, on stress and, your favorite tips and tricks in regards to stress management that you feature with your clients.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is, adrenaline, adaptogen, lion's mane, ginseng. Those are the first things that come to my mind. The brain supports, but stress is inevitable. It's not a matter of if, but when and how much. Therefore, rather than trying to say, I need to manage my stress, figure out how to decrease it. Make a list of everything you have to do in a day and just chop 20% off of the least important things and only do that. Okay, because what's important is that you don't try to manage more than your body can handle. People write checks their bodies can't cash all the time. So I like to do meditation, breathing. I use PEMF every day of the week because I like to ground and put that on steroids, if you will, because when you use high voltage PEMF, it's really helpful to charge your body and regain your homeostasis faster. But stress is a slow, gnawing, it just chews away at you, okay? Most people are the metaphorical frog in a pot of water, right? If you don't know the metaphor, it's like if you boil a pot of water and throw a frog in, the frog will jump out. But if you set the pot on top of the stove at room temperature water and you put a frog in there, it'll lay around, swim around. And if you slowly turn up the heat, the frog will just cook in there because you're slowly adding the stress on, the heat on, if you will, at a time, a little bit at a time. And each one of us humans, we just get accustomed to a certain level of stress and we slowly add on more and more and more. And next thing you know, we are the frog in the pot of water boiling. And we have just made sense of our symptoms or made sense of our disabilities and said, well, I can't do that anymore, or I can't do as much of that anymore, or I just chalk it up to old age, or whatever stories people tell themselves.
Yeah, it's in my journey, and maybe you resonate with this too a lot. It's discovering how much my nervous system has been overloaded with life, right, and how much I continue to just pile more and more on it. When the beauty of life and health, in my opinion, and what I've discovered is as you start to pull back the layers of stress, which we don't realize how stressed we normally are, right? It's the perfect, the pot of water boiling on the stove is the perfect analogy because we don't realize that we're in a boiling pot of water until it's necessarily too late, right? And what I've found is that, through nutrition, lifestyle strategies, as I've started to, unburden the body, then there's this whole new experience to life. And so my question, I guess, for you is, what are your favorite cues or kind of reminders or affirmations that clients or even practitioners can kind of ask themselves, right, throughout the day to kind of better understand the state of their nervous system, and maybe that's a simple act of, focusing on their breath, right, and meditation. But I think understanding the status of your nervous system could be one of the most, next to Premier State Nutrition, one of the most fundamental techniques that you can use to really support longevity.
Yeah, so think about it this way. You can't dry off while you're still in the shower. And that metaphor is applied to, imagine, shifting gears, is like you're in a sauna and you're dripping water on the hot rocks and just steams off. Let's imagine you are that oven in the sauna and you're just dripping a little bit, you're dripping some product on top. It's just burning right off, okay? So just like you can't out-exercise a bad diet, if you just continue to add more stress to your life, there is no level of supplementation that can compensate for that level of stress you're putting yourself under. And that's where I mentioned the concept of doing less. Breathing is a great tool. Scheduling micro moments in your day where you can check in, check your pulse. Most people at this point have wearables that they have some type of feedback system that talks about their heart rate, their recovery rate, recovery scores, sleep scores. They're so technically advanced now that they can pretty much tell you, your next ballroom is in 5 minutes, all kidding aside. People tend to look for something to compensate and allow them to maintain the same lifestyle that they're doing instead of saying, what do I need to change so I don't just literally burn out? Because like you said, people don't usually know it until it's too late. And oftentimes it comes in the form of cognitive deficiencies and cognitive decline because they've literally fried their brains with such high cortisol and dumping on caffeine to maintain the energy they need in order to maintain the fever pitch of their life and things like that. So rule number one is breathe. Use your breath as a barometer. Are you holding your breath? Check your pulse. Use a wearable to design system to determine whether you actually in a state of homeostasis, or if you're in a state of stress, you can do meditations, schedule them in your day so that you have time to decompress, because every single one of us is on a go, go, go. Just doing a photo shoot and a video before this, and you got this, and I got a call up to this. And so even myself, I have to be mindful that if I'm not aware, I will just load my plate up and continue to add, because it's exhilarating, it's exciting. It feels good to be producing. It feels good to be active and creating and things like that. And at what cost is it coming is the question.
Sure, yeah. It's all about that, managing that balance and understanding all the different barometers that you can really use as markers, right, of your journey, of how you're kind of unburdening and really experiencing life to its fullest. For maybe potential clients or consumers that are listening in to the podcast, what would you, actually I want to highlight and maybe speak more towards brain activation and, this brain activation technique that your clinics specialize and you're specializing in with, because, when we were talking about the podcast and, I wanted to bring you on as a movement specialist and talking, about how people can really feel embodied in their body. I was so excited when you actually let me know that you're specializing in brain activation. And so really, can you help define that for our audience today, and what a client or even a practitioner that maybe wants to visit you, what that is all about?
Yeah. The evolution for me, moving from strictly adjusting, diversified adjusting, to functional nutrition, to brain muscle therapy, to neuroemotional brain body connection work. That's the evolution I've gone through in my career. The movement part is to say, when you think about your body, in the absence of a trauma, in the absence of an injury, if you have a disability, a pain, an ache, or something you can't do, or it hurts when you do it, and you can't say, I fell down the stairs, I was in a car accident, I got hit, I fell off a bike, whatever it is. You can't point to something that caused it, and I don't mean 30 years ago I was in a car accident. That doesn't count. I hear that all the time. Back in 84, whatever. The point is, in the absence of a trauma, the body breaks down on the inside before the outside. Which means, if you have a joint ache and you haven't had an injury to the joint, you want to look at the muscles, because the muscles are what move the joints. And then you say, well, what tells the muscles what to do? Go upstream to the brain. That's why I always start at the top of the food chain, if you will, and say, what trickles down from here? Because if we humans didn't have muscles, we'd be a bag of skin and bones on the ground. We couldn't move our eyeballs, we couldn't breathe, our heart wouldn't pump any blood, nothing would happen. Therefore, I would say, what is going on in the brain that is changing how the biochemistry and the structure of the body is working? What's changing that? I use techniques like what Dr. John Turner teaches is called quantum shift technique, which in its simplest form is quantum neurology or functional neurology, where it identifies where there's an imbalance in the right or left brain, which then manifests in typically on the opposite side of the body, having a distortion where the shoulder will be turned in, the hip will be turned out. A person can't have the same amount of flexibility they normally do on one side of their body. And I use that to balance the body before I do any other therapies, because if we don't address the top of the food chain and say, how is the brain distorting the body, it doesn't matter what I do to the body to try and affect the brain, because the brain's saying, no, nice try, I appreciate your effort in terms of trying to help me balance by moving the body parts, and I had it that way for a reason, because I was adapting to some type of survival strategy I was using to get through life. Therefore, as practitioners, we have to say, honor the brain, honor the body, honor the immune system. Start with the brain, balance the muscles, and the joints almost always just resolve themselves, because if a joint has pain, it's typically because the muscles on the top on either side are pulling that joint together, right? If you think in the terms of chiropractic subluxation, where the joint is twisted in its normal range of motion, it's not that it's saying, well, I don't like you, you're not a nice person, Bob or Susie, I'm just going to twist. No, your brain is causing tension in the muscle, which is then twisting the bone, causing the subluxation. It's stuck there, and we think as an adjustment, we're going to resolve that dysfunction, when really what we need to do, from what I've seen time and time again, is balance the brain, balance the muscles, and the structures, the bones, if you will, resolve themselves. That's not even getting into, Will, the idea of how our perception of our reality, our perception of our stress is affecting our body. There's an image any one of our listeners can look up. It's called the cortical homunculus. It basically shows a map of the body on the brain. And what it will show you is which part of the brain is associated with which part of the body. Therefore, then I go into what's called quantum neural reset therapy, or QNRT, which is what Dr. Turner also teaches. And then I help them connect their past stress to a current trigger so that both of them resolve. The stress of the past now becomes wisdom to propel them forward, and they can then move forward with a wisdom that says, oh, I can now choose how to respond to this situation or person or whatever's happening, rather than just react to it, because I'm no longer stuck in the past in a trauma. I'm now in the present with wisdom, and I can move forward. And the body carries that wisdom with it.
It's a beautiful technique, honestly. It makes me kind of, as I was chewing on everything that you were saying, it brought me to my personal experience in my yoga practice and in my movement practice. And, I actually wanted to ask this question because, I feel that, a lot of times our body, whether because there was a trauma or an emotional event or a learned behavioral pattern, we're kind of frozen. The body is frozen in space, so to speak. And with what you just, painted in terms of the picture of how you're allowing people to make those connections, you're now actually moving through space more fully integrated, I guess, as an individual or a being. And my question for you is, how often do you actually find that when people are working through this brain activation, that they're actually finding these emotional traumas or these emotional injuries that are maybe, beliefs, or they're like embeds, and they're essentially in the muscle and causing, like, for me, my experience, I actually see like the emotion, or I see the vision of like what's holding me back in a certain space. Like for example, I've had a frozen shoulder, for years, right? And poor activation on my left side. And as I actually, was working through activation of that left side, I was actually, having these visions of my family and like, these moments in time where, perhaps these were limiting beliefs that were kind of embedded into that, muscle belly. And I'm wondering, how frequently you're actually encountering that in your practice, and how you would advise people, if they're experiencing that themselves, how they can move through that and integrate that. Mm-hmm. Because I feel in my own kind of personal, story, that this is a really pivotal moment to have wisdom, just like you said, in every moment. So would love your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's not enough to know, you need to know how. We're in the age of information, but we're not in an age of wisdom. I feel compelled to bring awareness to these concepts to people who aren't privy to them, because I know it's been the greatest liberator of my body, if you will. The body stores the history of trauma. It stores emotions in each one of your organs, in your muscles, in your joints, and things like that. Every single one of us is affected differently. For example, I grew up with asthma, and the lungs are about fear of being exposed, fear of loss, grief, worry, and things like that. Shoulders, which I've had plenty of challenges there, are related to either some type of stress you can't avoid, like I can't get out of the way, it keeps hitting me, if you will, or feeling like a failure. And when some of us grow up in families where there's high expectations, but not necessarily high support, it can lead to the homunculus in the brain holding on to that stress in the joint, right? The muscles are considered the receivers of the emotions. So a lot of what I pull from is called German New Medicine, GNM for short. And anyone who wants to look into that or get more acquainted with it can just go on Carolyn Markland's website called learninggnm.com. It's a great tool for anyone to become aware of medical conditions that have been labeled, parts of the body, organs, all the tissues. It's all scientifically based. Dr. Hammer developed a system, and he did CT scans and found lesions in the brain which directly correlated to parts of the body. When you think about the body, with the muscles being the receivers of the emotion, I always remind people, if there hasn't been a trauma, you want to go back and consider, what's the body trying to teach me? Because thoughts are the language of the brain and emotions are the language of the body. And when you're willing to stop and listen, or you work with a qualified professional to help you interpret what your body's telling you, anything's possible. Because nothing happens in the body by chance. Your body, if you were, like, for example, if a woman was pregnant and had a car accident and had a brainstem injury or something along those lines and caused her to be quote unquote brain dead, it's been shown that the body will actually birth the baby, will go through a labor process when the woman is technically brain dead. Like, but that's how much intelligence the body has if it's being kept alive on life support, if she's got that type of injury. All we have to do is take a step back and say, if I cut my skin, it's going to heal itself. If we remind ourselves we're 90% new every 90 days, it's awe-inspiring what the body's capable of. What we're taught in Western culture is that the body's dumb. We split it up into parts. You got a brain, you got lungs, you got a gut system, you got a detox system, you got cardiovascular system, and there's these specialists that break it all up into different pieces, and they specialize in one, and they never talk to the other specialists, and no one ever manages the whole picture. I consider myself a holistic clinician because I look at every aspect, not just blood work, not just bowel movements. I look at functional movements, because if there's a disability in the body, it's telling you something about what's going on the inside. Again, if the body hasn't been injured by a trauma, it's broken down the inside before the outside. Being a chiropractor, being someone who does physical medicine, people come to me looking for answers on what's going on. And I always draw them back to, well, let's talk about your stress. Because in the absence of that stress, and stress is what causes 90% of people to go into medical clinics looking for relief. So I think of teaching my participants as, how do they understand what the body's telling them, and how can they leverage that to be more enlightened in their own lives? Because I think every one of our own greatest superpowers is being self-aware. Because once you become aware of, oh, that's what that's related to, oh, and my bowel movement issue is related to that, or my headaches are related to that, take your pick. It all comes back to, it's the body's wisdom trying to teach you something.
Love that. What would you say, and there probably are several practitioners, if not many, that are listening to this podcast, and, they're probably very familiar, with kind of the world, in the world that you operate in, but they're also finding maybe that they're struggling with what is coming up in sessions with their clients, and how to help guide a client that is, maybe on the precipice of being more fully integrated ever in their life. But there's this thought,
sure,
there's this chatter that is, and you're an interpreter as a practitioner of, what that chatter is. How do you help?
Right.
How do you stay grounded, and how do you be a guide to somebody that's kind of going through this integration? And it could be really vulnerable, dark. There could be a lot of different feelings that are coming up. What do you do in those situations that really helps you kind of help guide them, but also help yourself stay grounded? Because you can be a tuning fork to those emotions coming off of that individual. So would love your practical tips and thoughts.
Yeah. Holding space for someone to process things is really important. Allowing them to navigate that, and, hand the box of tissues, like, here you go. People regularly cry when we're doing Q&A sessions because they hit that aha moment. They're like, oh my gosh. And then, the waterworks start because they've connected that dot. And I always say, I welcome your tears of release, because that means you're not going to leave here the same person you walked in. Okay? When I hear them sigh, like, that's a threshold. You just walk through a different doorway, because you just came to a conclusion or an understanding of something that's going on, but your mind has been changed. You have a different awareness, and such a huge opportunity. So for practitioners that want to dive into this, they might not be ready for the complexities of QNRT. They might just be ready for something as simple as, emotion code or neuroemotional technique. Those are some pretty basic stuff that they can access and start dabbling in that. The late Lee Woolley, who was part of New Human, he used to teach emotional CPR. And I don't know if that is still surviving in his absence, but that was a tool that I used to use as well. So I've used several different ones. But when you go through these dark places, just know that it's like a tunnel. And if you are willing to go through that dark tunnel, on the other side, the light is there.
It's dimensional. We have the screen. We'll edit it out. I want to talk a little bit about nutrition, especially as you walk through those dark tunnels of life. And, nutrition can be a source of light, as we know in quantum biology and quantum physics, and how, the cell, in each cell, there's biophotonic emissions, right? And that is a source of light. But want to talk a little bit about, in your practice, what have been the keynote kind of pillar products or even strategies that really help people more fully integrate. And I think, I can name a couple off the top of my head, but I would love your thoughts on that matter.
Oh yeah, it's a massive rabbit hole to go down. When people ask me what I do, I always ask them, what condition are you dealing with? What situation are you finding yourself in? What's your pain? What's your disability? Because that allows me to then go down a specific path that's relevant to them, right? The number one thing people complain about is back pain, like low back pain. So I immediately think of, well, are we talking about the kidneys or the bowels? What's reflexing to those back muscles? Is it tight hamstrings? Think about the meridians that run, and the organ systems that are tied neurologically to the organ system. So I think of, kidneys, easy, like Renavin and Hisinol is a great combination for that. When you think of liver, you could think of reishi or, there's oh my gosh, phytomethylate. The gut, looking at psilocybin, stomach, acid reflux, green tea. Numovin for the lungs, cognotropic for the brain. The adrenals, looking at, like I mentioned earlier, the ginseng, lion's mane, adaptogen R3, adrenaline. Like these are go-tos, like the castor oil packing, Medibody packing, Medidetox packing. Like there's so many tools in the tool chest. I couldn't even begin to name all of them. And that's why I always work with somebody to help me understand like what I can't see from inside my own jar, for using the metaphor of we all live in our own little jars and there's a label on the outside of a jar that I can't read my own label. So I need someone else to tap into my QRA systems and challenge the points and do some iterative testing to see what exactly is going on in my systems, because I'm pretty good at self-testing, but no one is completely agnostic when it comes to their own body. Like they always have certain assumptions they hold on to or certain subconscious beliefs and things like that. So that's, I could name products all day long. If there's a direction you want me to go, I'm happy to elaborate on one if you have one in mind. Will.
Yeah, I guess the question maybe to more so hone into a specific area, is there a dietary shift? And it's so individualized, right? I think when we talk about nutrition, the needs of an individual, you can't necessarily distill that to kind of a global paradigm, right? But I think there's some best practices and maybe some ways that, maybe in your practice and your clinical experience that you've really seen when somebody starts to take hold of this principle or this belief, they really start to maybe take that next step into that next chapter of their journey. And, I think a lot of times it's just understanding what, for me, it was like, what is quality nutrition? What does that really mean? And how can I seek that out every day? But also, like in my personal experience, it was when I really started to prioritize phytonutrients and omega-3s in my diet. And that was just it. My body just breath. It was this deep sigh of relief, and so wanted to kind of see in your experience if there's something that comes to mind that, a lot of people start to incorporate and they start to have that kind of moment.
Sure. Yeah. I remember when Dr. Marshall and Dr. Forbes brought out the biofield diet back in, I don't know, was it 2015, 2016, somewhere in there. And I was like, holy crap. And, of course, Dr. Marshall didn't do anything that was not extreme, shall we say. So, the oil change he would talk about with avoiding, what we now are aware of as seed oils and things like that, and helping ease the stress in the gallbladder. I know that at that time I wasn't even committed enough to myself, as I look back on it, to adopt the biofield diet and be as disciplined as I could have been. So I modified it and used principles of food combining to avoid overstressing the body late in the day. There's simple principles like eat like a king for breakfast, eat like a prince for lunch, eat like a pauper for dinner. Unburden the body. Don't eat within 3 hours of going to bed. Go to bed before 10. Move your body. Drink plenty of fluids, but also have the salts that you need in your system to maintain the water in your body. Otherwise, you're just going to pee it out. But those are simple things, and you can then go deeper and say, I'm going to test my first morning urine to see if it's 164 and 70. Like there's all kinds of stuff you can go on as far as the next level stuff that people can adopt. But when you start decreasing refined foods and you shop the perimeter of the store and you're only getting live phytonutrients and like you said, you mentioned omegas, that's when people start really feeling the difference and their bodies change. If we ate less and moved more, we would have more energy and we would be sleeping better and feeling better. Our love lives would be better. Our relationships would be better. Our productivity would be better. Everything. So increasing our phytonutrients, and I'm a big proponent of Premier Greens. That is an amazing product for people who don't get, and I don't know anybody, including myself, who gets enough greens every day to say, hey, I'm on track, because most people get so sick of eating greens. So I take my Premier Greens every day to get the phytonutrients and the nutrients that I'm not getting from the greens that I'm not willing to consume, like barley grass and things like that. But, those are fundamental principles that I think that I've learned from listening to Dr. Marshall, in his heyday, and also navigating that myself. Maintaining an optimal body composition, which is what a lot of people desire, isn't so hard when you take baby steps toward optimizing your daily nutrition and your daily supplementation, because there is no cookie code that can say this is going to work for everybody. It's always going to be something like an 80-20 Pareto analysis where it works for 80% of the people and 20% it doesn't work for. Every single one of us has to experiment with, what does our gut do with this nutrient? How much fiber can I handle? Can I handle this type of fruit sugar? Can I not handle that? Am I sensitive to things like oats? Am I sensitive to legumes? All this stuff. It requires a level of experimentation if we want to optimize our health. And the challenge is most people are so busy, they're so clinging to what they know, because they know if I eat X, I'm going to feel Y. That's where we come into it being it's not even a willpower thing. It's got to be planned in there. So those are some fundamental steps I would encourage people to do, is like plan out, take an hour on Sunday and meal plan. I mean, in this day and age of AI, like you can have it create a meal plan based on certain parameters, lickety split, and say, oh, I forgot, I'm sensitive to eggs, or, lentils make me gassy. It'll say, okay, soak your lentils overnight, or, it'll give you these clues, right? So there's really no excuse anymore, other than we are so stinking busy and so addicted to the high of running a crazy life that most people are not willing to step back and say, if I just make a small change, I can make a big improvement. And that's where like you said, phytonutrients comes into play and making those choices every day.
It is. I would encourage hopefully the listeners to go back and, replay everything you just said, because there was some really profound words of wisdom in terms of kind of relearning or retraining the body and really exploring what works for them. We all are researchers in realizing our health potential, and we're also researchers in trying new things that work for us. And I would actually love, maybe if you're willing to share your favorite product that you would really recommend from Premier Research Labs that almost everybody that is listening have the opportunity to experience, based on your own experience, whether that's clinically or just from how you feel personally when you take that product.
Yeah, sure. I'm just going to go with fundamentals. So, marine collagen is a great product to mix in to your other shakes, if you will. Ideally, we get a third of our protein from collagen to help rebuild our bodies. Adrenaline and renivin are staples. I use adrenaline and adaptogen every day. Renivin is a daily thing. When it comes to mealtime, Premier Digest, Premier HCL. For those more sensitive people, HCL activator might be necessary, either as a step toward or once it's like a more of a maintenance thing, depending on how you approach it as a practitioner or a consumer. I think of the greens, as I mentioned, as a daily staple, getting the phytonutrients in. As far as bedtime, meglycinate and cognotropic are super important. There are so many, Nick has done a great job. And back at the summit back in November, you guys put together those recipe lists as far as, the things we can do. And that was really inspiring to branch out and play with the different combinations and things like that. If I feel, for example, I don't use sunscreen, I will use green tea ND to help detoxify the solar radiation. And I'll literally pour it in my hand and rub it on top of my head, as far as getting the phytonutrients in my skin, so it neutralizes the free radicals that are created by the sun. I'm also very smart about my sun exposure. I don't just hang out between 11 and 2 and just get singed. I'm very mindful about it. Understanding that wearing sunglasses can change how your eyes perceive the light, and then you might get burnt. So an experiment that the listeners can try is on a day, go at the same time on equal sun days, and if you will, not Sunday, but sunny days, times in the day, and wear glasses, like sunglasses versus not sunglasses, and see which one you burn on. And it's been shown that you're more likely to burn when you're wearing sunglasses. It's literally altering how your brain perceives the light. But there's so many things. What else? Bug bites for my kids. Medi Body Pack or Medi Detox Pack is absolutely, a staple. My son had some issues with eczema, and so we used the Medi Soaks, Medi Body Baths, help get the nutrients in his body. Fungal imbalances, using allicin, and even the catechins in green tea are helpful with that. So, I think of, if I feel like I've got a cold or flu, which I just associate with chronic stress, I don't ever consider it a condition. I just simply say, take my eye off my stress. I let it slip again. Got too busy living life. So I'll jump on some reishi. Nuclear immune is fantastic as far as helping you bounce back. If I were to compete, I would do, one of Dr. Marshall's favorite recipes was like 12 caps of Renivin and 12 caps of adrenaline, and put those in a thermos and drink that, and that's going to just supercharge your kidneys and your adrenals, and you're going to perform way better. So there's so many protocols that he had put together, and listening back to those old podcasts, just amazing stuff. You better cut me off here because I could just blab on for hours.
I love you're keeping the legacy, and you're also evolving on the legacy of those protocols with Dr. Marsh. So thank you for sharing those. I know our audience was probably writing those down as you were sharing those fun facts. And I think we can coin it here, the Schilling sunscreen hack with the green tea on top of the head. I know you and I both, you got to protect the dome, right, when it's in the sun. But
Exactly.
Well, Dr. Schilling, I just want to first and foremost say thank you so much for joining us and your time today, and just truly being a steward. the facets and how you're really helping the clients and really the individuals, because I know you probably see some practitioners too, really integrate their whole self, right? And I think that's an aspect where a lot of times we don't really know who we fully are until we really start to walk the journey of integrating all the parts of who we are, right? Which, that requires us sometimes to really look into some deep, dark corners, or maybe some corners we haven't looked in our lives, or even how our body's not fully connected. And I think as people, in my experience, as you start to really, take hold of who you are, right, in every moment, that's when the magic of life really starts to unfold. And so I just want to say, on behalf of everybody that you've worked with and who you continue to work with, thank you for everything that you're doing. And for our audience that is interested to continue to stay involved in everything you do, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Go ahead and check us out on sequoiahealth.com. That's spelled SECOYA health.com. It's the name of the tree, inspired by the tree, but it's spelled phonetically. So that's the best place. You can look us up on YouTube. You can type in Dr. Schilling on any one of the platforms and you'll find me. If you have any ideas for content you want us to create, send it to us. If you want questions answered about this, that, or the other, go ahead and send it through. I'll do my best to support you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Schilling, for your time. And for everybody listening, thank you for listening on this journey. Hopefully it maybe uncovers some additional areas in your life that you want to explore and really support yourself towards ideal health. So for everybody listening in, thank you so much. And we'll look forward to catching you next time on our Premier Living podcast.